Hey, just want to take a second and tell all of you thank you so very much. It went out on the prayer chain. I kind of mentioned it very briefly on Friday or last Sunday. But my wife Ashley, she had to have a hip replacement this week, and so many of you have reached out via text or email and phone calls and messages, and just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for praying and continue to pray. As hopefully, if all goes well, I'll be picking her up from the hospital here in a little bit. So thank you very much for being a part of that and being a part of our family and our lives. So today, one of the things we're doing is we're kind of setting the stage and getting us ready as we head into a series that's going to run for the next few months, Living a Life of. And it's really going to be based out of the book of Romans. And we'll be going through there and kind of interweaving and challenging and based out of some core beliefs of who we are and what we believe and what we do and what we say. But just kind of to get you thinking in the right direction is it used to be really hard, really challenging to travel into foreign countries. Now, for those of you that remember travel pre 9/11, you remember that we used to be able to take people to the airport and go down to the terminal or to the gate, and you could wait there. Or if somebody was flying in, you had that privilege. You could go to the gate and wait for them to get off the plane. But even before that, there are some countries that are not necessarily English friendly. And if that's what you speak, like me, then it can be a little bit of a challenge. It can be a little unnerving. It used to be when you were trying to translate a language, if you didn't speak, you had to carry a little book. And you would try to figure out, how did they spell that? How did they say that? And did they pronounce it the right way? And you would try to find it in the book to communicate clearly. Sometimes it was even hard to if you got the city map, if you rented a car once you arrived at the airport and they would give you the free map that's the size of a box. They'd hand it to you and you're trying to drive and read a map and you're like, as it turns out, I don't know Chinese. And there was always some issues in trying to get around, and it could be hard and it could be scary. You don't necessarily know what they're saying or what is being communicated, and it can be unnerving. Well, things have changed. Obviously, they've changed. Technology has kind of twisted things. There are apps that you have on your phone, like, for instance, Google Translate. I use Google Translate in different countries. I can use the camera on my phone to hold it up to a menu, to a sign in the airport. I can scan it with my phone, and it will tell me what that sign said. I can speak into my phone through Google Translate, and it will tell me how to pronounce a certain word for the language that I need. Google Translate has changed things for us. We can speak into it, we can type into it, it can scan, and all of a sudden, it's not near as scary to be in a foreign country. Also, what's happened is we now have apps on our phone that help us with currency exchange. One of the keys that is really kind of a challenge, if you've ever traveled outside and you're using a different currency than what you are accustomed to, it usually feels different. We know how our dollar bills and $20 bills and such, we know how they feel. Well, when you're in a different land, the currency is all different. A lot of times we have a mentality, it's documented, they talk about that we almost have a monopoly money mentality. So when you're in a different country and they say this is quinzales and you go, oh, 500 quinzales for a Big Mac, that's not bad. Then you realize you paid $75 for it. And you get home and you're like, I'm broke, what happened? It's because now we can do the exchange rate right there. You know where you can find the best place to get the best exchange rate because there's money that costs money to get money and all that. We now have GPS on our phones that can tell us where to go in these foreign countries, where to turn, where not to turn. Airbnb, Uber, all of these things have made travel not near as scary. Not near as scary. It still can be unnerving. You may get anxious about flying overseas or to a different land, but really, technology has leveled the playing field. Technology has allowed us to speak the same language even when we don't speak the same language. It's given us a lot of benefits that I'm not even sure it was intended to, but it has. So, I said last week, Jake's off in college now and playing football at Olivet, but a few years ago, he began the recruiting process, and and a coach in the area. If you're a college football fan, you've heard of P.J. Fleck, and he was at Western Michigan, and now he's at Minnesota. He had this recruiting mantra that he uses, and it's still used at both universities in some of the marketing, and Minnesota uses it still today in the football area. It's just their little theme is row the boat, and he's got a whole story that goes with that, and what that means, and that the oar and the boat and the direction and all of those things, and that's not what we're going to talk about. But when they started recruiting Jake, and he started getting letters and some phone calls, and that Coach Fleck, through one of the assistants, had sent us a YouTube video that they had made. And in this video, it said, "You please watch it." And it's like 250 or 256 vocabulary words or phrases that they wanted Jake to watch and understand. This was their whole rationale. He said, we got to speak the same language. It is really hard for us as a team to move forward and together if we're not speaking the same language. It's really hard for us as a team to move forward together if we're not speaking the same language. That just resonated with me. And I really started looking at that and reading about that and thinking about that in the companies you work with, and even your home families that you deal with, or maybe it's the organizations you volunteer for, if it's in the Valpo Americans or the Pop Warner or whatever it may be. If it's really hard for an organization to stay on track and take the next step and go where it's supposed to go if everybody's not speaking the same language. I mean, if every one of us today went to the movies this afternoon, we would come back. There's probably pieces of that movie we would all talk about. But there would be somebody that would have something, and they just took a totally different meaning. And so what happens is we all end up having our own version of the reality or the truth. And so for us to really go forward, we got to make sure everybody is on the same page. Everybody's tracking the same way. We understand what the words mean and why we say them and why they're important. You know, in the early first century, Christians did not speak the same language of what was happening with their higher-ups. There was this kind of a moment in time where there was some real challenge in what was taking place. And there was some challenge that Jesus was at odds with the religious right, with those in authority. And the Pharisees who had orchestrated the crucifixion of Jesus, and the early church were actually at odds as well. And there was something that was taking place. And so to really grasp this and understand this and the value and why it's important for us to understand Romans and why it's important for us to value what Paul had to say, we got to kind of take a step back over here and understand a few things as we tee this series up. See, after the garden, after the flood, God makes this covenant with Abraham. And the covenant with Abraham said, you're going to be as your people, your nation. They kept calling him your nation, is going to be as numerous as the stars in the sky, the sand on the beach. And you will flourish. And this is how our covenant is going to be. And it was talking about one group of people, one people group, the Hebrew people or the Jewish nation. And that's where it was. And after years of sin and decadence, they end up in slavery in Egypt. And when they come out of Egypt, Moses comes in as the rescuer. And he comes in and God gives Moses the law. And the law is laid out. Now, we think of the law, many of us who are not from this era, we think of the Ten Commandments, but it was more than that. When you start reading in Leviticus and Numbers, then the law is given out. And there was almost 900 rules. So in the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden, when this all began, when man was created and the garden was put into place, there was one rule. See, that whole thing was based out of relationship. The whole thing was based on that God walked with us and talked with us, and he was in community with Adam and with Eve, and it was all about relationship, and there was one rule: do not eat this tree. Don't eat the fruit off this tree. Everything else was free game because it was all based and rooted out of relationship. Everything. And then as man sinned, the woman sinned, and they're separated. The relationship, there is now a chasm in the relationship between man and God. And the law comes into place to help almost create that relationship now. And so as the garden is taking place, and this is happening, and Moses is now a part of this, and he has given us the law, everything begins to a little bit change. We now need somebody to go on our behalf, to meet with God on our behalf. And so we go through this story of the fall and then forgiveness, and it's a cycle that happens all through the Old Testament. But there was a plan that was well in place long before now. Long before now. That God knew he would send his son as a new covenant that would take the place of the old covenant. This new covenant would take the place of the old covenant. And as Jesus comes in, as Jesus enters the story, he begins turning the world upside down in the relationship. He begins talking about, the law was here and it was good, it had a purpose, but now there's a new way. You no longer need a priest to go on your behalf. You no longer need these things. We're going back to the way it was in the garden when it was all based on relationship. And the rules was no longer like 900 rules. Now it is this, because they asked Jesus, they said, well, hey, tell us, what is the number one rule? If you had to summarize all of them, what it is. And that was a trap. They were trying to trick him. And he goes, well, you got to love God with all your heart and you got to love people. Time out. You just summarized 900 rules, caveats to what you could do and not do, and you just summarized it into these 2 lines, love God, love people. Are you serious? I mean, the Jewish people was walking around a little bit on pins and needles about what they could and could not do. Because the Pharisees would sit around and create new rules. They would think about it, debate it, chew on it. Hey, did y'all have a mom that would buy a couch and then tell you couldn't sit on it? Yeah, we did. And it was like, well, do we sit? I thought furniture was, okay, I'll sit on the floor. And that's where the Jewish people were. They didn't know what they could and could not do. And they were always kind of teeter-tottering on what could happen. And Jesus says, forget all that. We're going to elevate the law into right relationship. And if you are who you're supposed to be, that means you're going to love God and you're going to love people. You're going to love God and you're going to love people. And everything gets boiled down into there. So what takes place next in this unbelievable story is Jesus pays the price. He says, not only am I going to take this place for you, and there's going to be a sacrifice that's going to be made. I'll do it. You no longer have to bring your goats, your pigeons, and your doves. You no longer have to bring the best sheep and lamb. You don't have to do that anymore because I've already done it. I've already done this for you. But there's another plan that's part of this covenant. So you're going to go out and be my hands and feet. Now, I got to be honest that if we had been in heaven and God's laying out the game plan to all the angels, here's how this is going to work. There's going to be the old covenant, there's going to be a new covenant, and then my people are going to take the word and go out. I don't know that I would have said, God, this is ingenious. I think I would have said there's probably some struggle here. Because as Jesus told the disciples that you are to go into all nations and make disciples, all nations, everybody, all people, not just the ones we like, not just the same in the same bloodline, but all people, go make disciples. Amen. See, that would have been new information to everybody. That would have been contrary to the way anybody would have believed. And so the early church was in a little bit of a struggle. What does that mean? When he says, go into all nations. What does that look like? See, if we go back into the garden, everything kind of had a purpose. The animals had a purpose. There was something they were needed, but they needed to be tended to. The vegetation, the trees that were planted, they were good. Maybe they provided shelter, and maybe they provided food. There was a purpose, but once a tree is there, it doesn't move. It's stuck. It's right here. And in the creation, when we were put here to tend the garden. We're to work it. And so all the way fast forward to Jesus, when he says, go into all the nations, what he is saying is, I'm leaving the keys to the church van with you. And y'all get to be my hands and feet and go out. See, we have a new role in the covenant. It's to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We have a new role in the covenant. So why is Paul in Romans so important? Well, here's why he's so important. All the disciples Jesus had. So when he's laying this out, he's washed their feet. They're having the Last Supper, and he's doing these things, and he's talking to them. He goes, "You're going to go into all the nations. You're going to find people. You're going to go everywhere." They're probably looking around the room, going, "We're all Jewish." And in that culture, there were the Jews and the Gentiles. Everybody outside of Judaism would have been a Gentile. No matter what race, no matter what, you would have been a Gentile. How do we go into all the nation if we're Jewish. We're not going to walk into all these different cultures. What are we going to do? And he goes, you're going to all the nations. But see, the plan was already in place. And then Saul, who you will read about, and you go about 3 years after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, Saul comes into play. And he is this Pharisee. He is Jewish, however, he's a Roman citizen. And this would have given him the passport to travel anywhere he needed to travel. This would have given him the credentials to go into all cultures. So all of a sudden, this master plan of this new covenant is being executed in the very eyes within 3 years of Jesus' death and resurrection. And so here we go in the first century of the Christian church, all the way to 2019 and beyond, we have the same mandate. We have the same mandate. The same plan that was being orchestrated way back when, being executed through the disciples and through Paul, is still being executed in our lives. That you and I get to go into all the nation. We get to make disciples. That's who we are. That's what we do. And so the coming series throughout this fall, we're going to be looking at the story in Romans and why it was so important, because it was teaching the people how to live the life. How to live the life of. What he was calling out for us, that we believe that Paul was wanting to make sure we understood, not just then, but now, and also in the future. Kind of the theme verse in Romans, all that comes down to verse 16. It says, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God that brings salvation to everyone who believes, first to the Jew and then to the Gentile." So we got to make sure, if we're going to be the hands and feet of Jesus, if you and I are going to be clear on that we are to go out and do, then we've got to make sure that we're speaking the same language. And just like the summary of what just happened in Romans 1:16 is a summary of the Great Commission, which we also have as a mission statement, helping people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. That you and I have got to make sure that we're helping people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. This is not about filling this room and making this room bigger. It's about making the kingdom fuller. Amen. See, I'm not motivated. I'm just being honest. I'm not motivated to manage the circus. Sometimes, I said this a few weeks ago, sometimes so I'm just telling you, I am off notes now. I haven't slept a lot last 4 or 5 days, so I'm off notes. But here it is. Sometimes I'm afraid our role in the Christian world is to play the lifeguard in the swimming pool. Walk. Walk. Quit holding his head under the water. And there are people that can't swim that continually get in the deep end and they start drowning, and we go, all right, I'll save you. That's not what I'm really geared up to do. I'm not geeked up to be a lifeguard. What I'm really geeked up about is how are we going to spread the word to build the kingdom? Amen. Anywhere, any way, anyhow, any shape. If it's silly, crazy nuts, let's do it. Let's find ways to make the kingdom more full. I don't want to build a country club. I don't want to build a place where people just come and hang out and because the who's who is here. I love it the way it is because this place is messed up. There are folks in here that are crazy. I mean, look around. Some of y'all made poor choices in marriage. They're nuts. That's where we're at. That's who I like. That's my people. That's my people. And that's where we're at. I don't want to play lifeguard. I want us to build the kingdom. And that's why we say helping people become fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. It's not about making this place bigger. It's about expanding the kingdom. So if we're all on the same page, then great, let's go forward. Then meeting people exactly where they are to help them navigate the next steps in their spiritual journey. That we want to help you, that the hopeful become walkers, the walkers become runners, and the runners become soarers. That if you took the grid and you said, I'm here, wherever that may be, because you can't stay here. You got to keep moving. The bike falls over if you quit pedaling. So we got to be moving in the right direction. And then you've got to be honest with yourself and say, I land on this grid somewhere. Where am I? Because the garden is full of trees that doesn't move. We were not made to be the tree. We were made to work the garden. You are man and you are woman and you are working the garden. You are the hands and feet. We're not allowed to stay put. Trees stay put. You got to move. I got to move. I got to continue to grow and continue to move. And see, our journeys are a constant process, growing, maturing, failing, succeeding. We just can't stay here. So we got to make sure, if we're going to be the hands and feet, if we're going to be the church, we got to make sure we have the same language. We got to make sure we're speaking the same language. So we believe, these core values, we believe in gathering. We value gathering as a tribe of believers regularly for corporate worship. Hebrews 10, verse 24 says this, "And let us consider how many spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." See, gathering is when we do this, when we get together. Now, I know people can argue. I don't have to be there to have church. I don't know that I can fight that. But here's what I can argue with you about. That is when we gather, if you're watching with us online, if you're a part of CR on Friday night and what's getting ready to happen on Thursdays at Westville, wherever that may be, when we gather together, that is where the fresh air comes in for the living organism, and we are a living organism. And the fresh air comes through because we sing together, we read scripture together, we pray together, we're in community together. When we do this, it is fresh air to the living organism. First service, there was a family all sitting right here that had lost the father and a husband this week. They sat in that row, all of them. They walked in here first service because this is what you do when you're grieving. You come together. There are also people that had babies this week that were walking around in first service. They are celebratory. When we do this together the right way, we can grieve and celebrate at the same time because we're doing it together. And when you and I are not here, when we make a choice not to be here, we're robbing the community. We're robbing them because you bring stuff to the table I need in my life. And you, by not being here, are robbing your spiritual journey because I bring stuff to your life you need. We're doing this in here together. Now, about 15 years ago, we were in the Bahamas on this mission experience, and we had been doing some things, and we ended up staying a couple months and working. And every Friday we did something fun, and we'd go to different dive spots, and we got to swim with sharks and do all this. But one of the dive things we did at Stewart's Cove was you got on these personal submarines, and they look kind of like mopeds in the water, and they had these big tanks, bubbles, that they'd pump air into. And so you had to get in the water, come underneath, swim in, and get on the moped-looking personal submarine, and then you would drop down somewhere between 25 and 50 feet, and you would ride as they would pump air into the bubble that would keep the water from rising in and plus air for you to breathe. I wasn't crazy about doing it, but everybody was doing it, so I thought, okay, I'll do it. So I got in, and I've done the tank dives, I've done things like that. I'm not nervous in the water. But I get in, I get on my moped. I thought it would be fast. It wasn't. And so that was disappointing. But it was like, to the water. I mean, snails passed us, but that's not the point. When we got in and I got down to about 30, 40 feet in the water, we got in there, and I'm thinking about, it's a little unnerving when you're that far under, and how do you breathe and all that, and my chest started tightening up. I mean, I could feel it, and I start having this conversation in my head. You are the biggest sissy on the planet. What is wrong with you? And I'm talking to myself under the water, going, I don't know. And then my head started pounding. My eyes felt like they were bugging out of my head, and I am struggling to breathe. And I thought, I cannot believe I am going to ask for assistance under here moving at about 1 knot. I cannot believe this is happening. And I am embarrassed, and I grab the hose, and I pull it, and they bring me to the surface, and I get out, and I was I gasped. I was doubled over, and I was just trying to take in the air, and I thought, and all of a sudden, I was feeling a lot better. And then I hear this. Come on, we forgot to turn your air on. Do you want to go back down? No, I don't want to go back down. You tried to kill me. It's the fresh air that keeps the organism alive. That's what happens here. That's what happens here. That's why we do it. That's why we gather together. Now, part of what's happening, you've heard it the last couple of weeks, we have a new app. And I need all of us, if you've not downloaded it, to download it. Because this is going to be a great way for us to connect and assimilate. Now, my friend Keith took some time this week. He made a video on how to use it. So I'm going to ask if we watch this video real quick. If you've not downloaded it, download it. Get the app. All right, let's watch the video.
Hi, my name's Keith. It's my privilege to preview for you our brand new app here at VNC. You can download that app at the Apple App Store or at Google Play. Simply search for Valparaiso Nazarene Church, should pop up, and you'll be ready to go. So let's take a look at the app and some of the features that are there. You'll see up in the upper left-hand corner, sign up. What that icon lets you do is sign up, as you can see, for several of the different events that are going on here at VNC. And it's just an easy way that you're gonna be able to do that from home. You're gonna be able to do that even when where you're seated right now. You'll be able to get signed up as you hear about things so you don't forget them and forget about it later in the week. You also see on their live worship, that's our online service that takes place every week, going on at 9 and 10:45 on Sunday mornings, and then 6:30 on Tuesday nights. Maybe you're out and about, or maybe you're just out of town when the services are happening. This is a great way to work through the app to watch those services. I want to point out Sunday resources. You'll see that in the upper right-hand corner. Sunday resources are going to be a great way for you to remember everything that took place on a Sunday. From the bulletin information to the music playlist, which you can actually access before we even sing some of those songs. So when you come in, you're familiar and ready to go to worship together. You'll see the YouVersion app is on there, which will get you linked straight to YouVersion so you can find the scriptures that are being used. And then one of my favorite resources on this is with the teaching notes. Not only will you be able to see those teaching notes and work your way through them as whoever's teaching speaks to us from their heart, but at the end, there's a place for you to take notes. And you can write down your thoughts, write down whatever you feel like God is saying to you, and just it allows you to then save it and send it to your email. At next line, you'll see there's events. There's a place where you can get more information about these upcoming events. The life groups, you can find out more about life group and even express interest in doing so. You can find on the icon that says serve. There are so many ways to serve here at VNC, and when you click on that icon, it begins to list those out for you so you can begin to ask some questions and take some next steps in figuring out how to plug in here at VNC. The next line that you'll see, it talks about connecting with us. That's a way for you to get hold of the pastors or the church office when you have a question, or maybe you need to just share a thought, or there's just something going on you need to get in contact with us. You'll find the accessibility there. Now, let's take a look at the prayer request icon. And when you click on there, just think about life. Unfortunately, prayer, thoughts of wanting someone to pray for you doesn't just happen on a Sunday morning. So with the app, you're able to, just go right on there, click on that, and submit a prayer request and say, hey, I just want people to join with me in praying about this. And when you do that, one of two options that you get to choose. You can choose to keep it rather confidential and say, you know what, I only want the pastors to know about this. But there's also another option where you can allow everybody who's part of our prayer chain, which we're talking hundreds of people who consistently are lifting each other up in prayer. And you can allow them to come alongside you and join you simply by filling out that information on this app. Now, you'll also see on that page that you can join that prayer group, and you can be interceding for other people and just lifting them up in prayer as the different requests come in. So you can also see on there, you can give, you can look at past sermon series and just go back to some of the old teachings that we've had and work your way through those again, or maybe share those with a friend. And listen, there are so many more features, but we're out of time. I want you to get in there and to explore and really get to know this app, because we truly believe not only will it be a great resource for you, but it could be a great entry point for someone that you know and letting them know more about VNC.
All right, so it's important that you download the app. You can put it on your iPad or tablet or your phone, but it's important because it's the way to connect and assimilate and information that is gathered and shared and sign up. Everything that Keith said. Thank you, Keith, for putting that together. The second core value is community, that we value living in our lives in a small group environment that stress community with others. Acts chapter 2, verse 46 says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people, and the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. That community is unbelievably important to us. It is way too easy for you to hide in this room. We understand that you can slide in about 5 to 10 minutes late, find your seat, sit here, and then when we stand to pray at the end and you believe everybody's eyes are open, but I can tell you the people on the balcony don't close their eyes. They see you sneak out, and you think, I've done my duty. I've gone to church. And you can do that, but community is about you are meeting with people and connecting with people. Now, I understand some of you have been wounded and hurt by other people. Hurt people hurt people. We know that. What I'm saying is that being in a group is worth the risk. We know that for some of you, it's a risk situation for you. You don't want to be hurt. You don't want to be wounded. You don't want to be lied to. We get that. But there are people, we've already said, this is a messed up group, so welcome to the party. Get in the group. You need to be in the group and be a part of this. The risk is worth it. Next week, there is a luncheon. You can sign up on the app that you just downloaded to be a part of this lunch to help you get in a group. We believe it's important. Out there in the lobby is the VNC shop. That is where all materials will be purchased from here on out. All tickets for Michael Jr. that you need to buy. The tickets for any event will be at the shop. You can also buy the shirts and coffee mugs and stickers and things. The shop will be continuing to evolve, but it's important for us to let other people know you're a part of the group. You're part of the family, so make sure that you stop by and you do that and be a part of the community. Third one is serving. We value giving of ourselves by serving others. 1 Peter 4:10 says, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. We know it's fulfilling, we know it's beneficial, but you are a leader. Everybody in the room is a leader, and you have influence over somebody that you could be helping. You could be influencing for the kingdom. That it's an opportunity to make a difference in what God is doing. Now, almost a month ago, we got a phone call. I got a phone call from Dana Dutz, who's one of our nurses at one of our local hospitals, and she called and she said, we've had a tragedy. A young man was killed on a job site, and they're from Guatemala, and so we need help. We're not sure. We're not translating well. We need some help. And so I know that there was he was in first service, Gabriel Luton, his wife Samantha. I called Gabriel and I said, listen, I don't know what you got going on, but we got a situation. The two brothers of the individual that has died in this tragic accident, they're at the hospital and they're not understanding. We need help. I said, Gabriel, I kind of pleaded. I was like, we got this, we got that. Can you? He goes, yeah, sure. I said, but Gabriel, you're going to give up your night. He goes, I got it. Okay. He took off, went to the hospital. He translated for him. He helped take him to dinner. His wife fixed dinner for him. He got him fed. They got him to the hotel. And so I called that night, Gabriel, what's going on? How are we doing? They're good. I've been with them. It's 11 o'clock at night. I got them taken care of. I just took them from my house to the hotel. Gabriel, that's amazing. What's it look like tomorrow? Well, I'm going to take them to the coroner's office. I'm going to run them here, and then I'm going to do this. I call it noon. I said, Gabriel, listen, I know you've been giving your day and all last night. I said, can I take these guys to lunch? He goes, why? Where are you eating? So, well, okay. And I kept pushing. I was like, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? And basically, what I think he said, I translated in my own language was, shut up, I got this. That night, at some point, he called me and he goes, they're on their way to Indy. All is well. 2 weeks ago, I called and I said, Gabriel, I just want to tell you once again, thank you for stepping up. You were the hands and feet. This is what we talk about. You're embodying what I am talking about. And he goes, yeah, I just talked to the brothers. They're doing okay. You're still talking to them? Yeah, why wouldn't I? I don't know. I'm an idiot. But that's what service is. And there's something about the giving of it, but there's also the value in what takes place. From teaching children to greeting to singing, it's important for us. Because it's hard for us, we can't be selfish with our time and talent. We just can't. Fourth one is generosity. We value living a life full of generosity and giving faithfully. Luke 21, 1-4, that kind of the summary there is Jesus talking about the poor widow who gives her 2 small copper coins. And he says this, truly I tell you, he said, the poor widow has put more in than all the others. All these people gave their gifts out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, she put it in all she had. Now, when we look at this isn't about the amount. It's not about the amount. It's about the heart. In fact, when we look in the Old Testament, we talked about the law earlier. The law was very strict, and it said 10%. Now, in everything, the teaching that Jesus had on the Sermon on the Mount, he took the law, and what he did was he elevated it. He elevated it. When the law said, well, if you're an adulteress, then we're going to stone you to death out in the city square. Jesus said, well, don't even have the act. If you look at that girl wrong with your eyes and you have lust, then you're guilty of sin. So Jesus took the law and elevated it. He didn't say, do whatever you want. You're okay. It's already been paid for. He elevated the law. When it comes to giving and being generous, it's not about the 10%. That's the starting point. But if you've never been generous in your life, then start somewhere and start working that way. Because there's power in this, because he calls us to be generous. Here's what I will tell you. I used to say I don't think it's probable. I have switched gears. Now I think it's impossible. You cannot be a fully devoted follower of Jesus Christ if you are stingy. It's impossible. As all that the Lord has given and blessed us with, we can't hold on to our stuff. I believe that's what got the rich young ruler all worked up. We got to celebrate some generosity. As you saw, the lobby has been redone. But when we built, the financial times were so unbelievably challenging that one of the things we cut out was putting exterior signage on the property. And it's been 10 years. We've really been crafting a better idea. 10 years. And so as money is kind of tight and we couldn't figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to do it, we actually had a family this summer that has said, we would like to step in the gap and do this. And so you may have seen in the paper, we have a variance meeting with the city on Tuesday to have exterior. Valpo has some pretty strict sign laws and regulations, and we're in the process that hopefully in the coming months you will see some exterior signage out there. That generosity, when people just start giving of themselves over and above what you would think, it is amazing what can happen. If you have never given, now I want to challenge you now. That we will, if you try it for 90 days and you don't make your bills and you're hurting, come back in, we'll give it back to you. It's not about the money. It's about the act of being generous and trusting God that he is faithful. So we challenge you to be a part of that. The fifth one is invitation. That we value the power of a personal invitation to help others with the next step in their spiritual journey. Matthew 28:19 is the Great Commission. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The invitation is this what we do when we invite people. It's kind of dual-folded here. One is the invitation. We do want you to bring them in for the fresh air, but we also want you to invite them into your story. Now, on that Sunday resources, if you go to the VNC app that you've downloaded and you go to Sunday resources, there is a tab that will say invitation survey. We want to know, how did you come to church? It's just a handful of questions. It'll take you 10 seconds. I did it during the video first service. I took the survey. So you can do it. It won't take you long at all. You can be a part of that. But it's this invitation inviting people into the narrative of Jesus. That we were created, we said, to be the hands and feet. We worked the garden. That God invites us, this is what gets me. God invites us to co-create the future with him. God invites us into the possibility of influencing the kingdom for tomorrow. That we get to be a part of this, but it only happens if you're living a life of invitation. That we have a responsibility. The future of the church is planted with us. If we just gather here and that's it, then it dies here. But we got to go and be. That you can cultivate your story. Nobody can tell your story as well as you. You are the one. You have this unbelievable story that God has done in your life. You will share it better than anybody else. So cultivate your story, share your story, and invite others into the story. And the final one is holiness. That we value a holiness lifestyle that's honoring to God. And 1 Peter 1:14 says, as obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance, but just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, be holy because I am holy. That God who's holy calls us to a life of holiness, a life of separation. That we don't believe that you're going to walk around as perfect angels, but what we do believe is that our intents will be there. That the process will be shaping and changing and molding us to be the men and women that God has called us to be. That we will become more and more Christ-like. That holiness has got to be vital in our lives. It's got to be vital in who we are. That if we're really going to run and we're really going to be soars in our faith and our journey, then we have got to invite holiness as a part of that story with us. That if we're really going to be the hands and feet, we're really going to do what God's called us to be, that we're really going to work the garden, that we're really going to go to all nations, then we got to speak the same language. We got to be on point with our mission and vision, that we're going to gather together, that we're going to live in community together, that we're going to serve together, that we're going to continue to be generous, that we're going to live a life of invitation, and then we're going to let God continue to shape us and mold us from the inside out, that we'll be the people that He's called us to be. Okay? All right. Hey, stand with me. I want to pray for you. I want to invite you. Make sure, please, download the app. If you are not in a life group, after you download the app, you sign up to be a part of the lunch next week. Please don't hide in here anymore. I don't want to be a lifeguard. I want us to fill up the kingdom. I really want God to look down and go, what happened to VNC? Those folks are going nuts. They're spreading. They're running. They're doing. And I want us to be a part of that. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for the day you've given us. Thank you for the story that you have given us. And Father, as we dive into your servant Paul's letter to Rome, that we'll understand what it means to live the life of. That we'll continue to be your people. That we will work the garden. We will be your hands and feet. And Father, I just ask now that you go with us. You give us the courage and the strength to be who you've called us to be. And we'll honor you with all that we do and all that we say. And we ask these things in your most precious and holy name. And everybody said, amen.